I'm Daniel Gillum here in the performance studio of Louisville Public Media, 90.5 WUOL Classical Louisville. And with me today is Emily Albrink, singer, a professor at the University of Louisville, here with pianist David George. And she's here to sing, to preview her first album coming out on April 28th. The album is called Force of Nature, and that's also the title track. It's the song, a song of a set composed for her by Jake Heggie. Emily, David, we'd love to hear Force of Nature.
Everybody keeps on telling me, Emily, your mother was a force of nature, but they really have no idea. She was a tornado, tearing trails through tangled brush, shaking the walls of my refuge. She was rain, warm, relentless, drenching doubts, flooding every crevice of my being. She was sun bright, blazing, bearing down to earth. It's hard to breathe. Wind soothing senses, soft caress, cooling on my cheek. Changing weather, force of nature, my force, my
Emily Albrink singing Force of Nature by Jake Heggie, composed for her new album with the same name coming out on April 28th. David George playing piano for this performance today. The Force of Nature is the late Nancy Albrink, your mother, whose Force of Nature I felt in this very room, in fact,
Okay.
on several occasions.
Yes, of course. Yeah, right.
Yeah. You've taught a lot of songs, you've learned a lot of songs,
Yes.
you've heard a lot of albums.
Yes.
It's not that common that the singer of said album or songs writes the text for the songs.
Right.
These are words by you
Yes.
and by the pianist who's on the album,
Kathleen Kelly. Yes.
Kathleen Kelly. What was that like, being a part of the process in that way?
Yeah, it was incredible.
So, the whole inspiration for this album is my mother, and she died suddenly 5 years ago. And she was a pianist, musician, force of nature in my life, musically and personally. And during COVID, I just had this kind of moment where I really wanted to create something and be part of something that was lasting. We sing live music all the time, and it is so amazing. And it's ephemeral, and so to be able to, really have a hand in creating something that I can give to my grandchildren, even though they won't be able to play the CD, but they'll listen to it somehow in their chips and planted in their brains. I first approached. I knew I wanted to have new music on the album. It's really important to me to be creating and adding to the canon of classical art song, specifically songs for women. We have so many songs for men over centuries, past few centuries. Art songs that were written with men in mind, and they get to tell all kinds of stories and delve deep into their psyche. And women, sure, I mean, there are some songs. There are definitely some cycles written for women. Frauenliebe und Leben comes to mind. Of course, it's written by a man, with text by a man. So it was very important for me to explore stories about women. And so I approached, actually, ironically, Jake Heggie, who is a man, but he is a dear friend and one of my most respected composers. And I said, would you possibly write me a song? And he said, well, why don't I just write you a cycle? It's like, oh, great. That's a dream come true. So, and then we were looking through text, I was kind of like thinking about poetry that my mom liked, or even looking at like notes that she had written me or essays that she had written, things like that. And nothing was really working. Nothing was speaking to us. And Jake just said, well, why don't you write it? And I mean, I'm good at a lot of things, but I'm not a writer, and I'm certainly not a poet. I've never written poetry before. Kathleen Kelly, my incredible pianist for this album, she is also a beautiful poet. And Jake had set some of her stuff already. And so he said, well, why don't you just ask Kathy to help you? And we came up with these poems, these pieces that really spoke to my relationship with my mom, and then what, looking back, now that I've lost her, how important I realized that relationship was, and kind of how bittersweet it is that, someone has to die in order for you to realize that. So, yeah.
So her legacy lives on, obviously, through this album,
Yes.
In many ways.
Yes.
And not every artist puts out album every year. So I think when you're doing your first album and doing something that may be unique and maybe one of a few things maybe you do throughout a career, it's probably important to do something very personal, right?
I just felt called to do it. I think so. I mean, yes, it's like having a baby, and I've had babies, so I can say that. It's like having a child. I mean, it's been 2 years in the making, and it's just been unbelievable amounts of work, and it's a labor of love, and I've loved every minute of it. And it's also been a huge learning curve. I mean, just how do you record?
Sure. Yeah.
I brought in a producer and a sound engineer from Minneapolis to come, and we recorded it in Comstock at U of L, and learning all of the music.
It's not something you learn in school, or you learn, you only learn by doing it.
Yes, exactly.
So who else is on the album besides Jake?
Right. Okay. Yes. So we have Renee Orth, who is actually a graduate of U of L. She's a wonderful composer. She set a song cycle that actually just won a major award, the Nats Art Song Competition Award for 2023. It's called "Weave Me a Name," and it's with text by Jean Minahan, and it is a beautiful story of generations of women in Jean's life. And then there is Steve Rouse, who actually taught Renee at U of L, who just retired from the composition faculty at U of L, and he has written a beautiful set as well. Of different monologues, and it's sort of talking about loss and love, and there's even a song about just like rolling the windows down and singing at the top of your lungs to the radio. And then Naila Nombeko, who is a composer I sought out, who lives in New York, and I had heard some of her music and really loved it. And she wrote a cycle specific to women with text by Mary McCallum, and it really talks about modern day being a mother and being a woman, and the mental load and the endless ticker that goes in your head of lists and just all of that, the over programming of our lives.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like a very personal album to you in many, many ways. April 28th is when the album comes out, but before that, in March, you're going to be singing a recital and releasing a single from that album?
Yes, that's correct. I'm singing a recital at 6 p.m. in Comstock, and Kathy Kelly will be in town for that. And we'll be just premiering all of the works. So very, very excited. And I have to mention just a quick thank you to David George for being here today. He is wonderful and has been such a great help. And he helped me prepare all this music to learn it at the beginning, along with my mentor, Edie Tidwell. And he continues. We're having lessons every week to get ready for this concert. So I'm so grateful that he's here and able to play for me.
Well, thank you both for being here today and previewing Force of Nature, which comes out April 28th. Emily Albrink singing on the album, Kathy Kelly playing piano, words of them on this cycle of Jake Heggie and many other composers as well. Thanks, Emily, for being here.
Thank you so much.
Hi,